You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Well, what story is it, folks? What story is it that we're supposed to follow in Ukraine? Hey, welcome back to the Prepared Mind. They are pushing for WWIII, right? The big WW3. That would be the Biden administration and Canada, may as well be Canada, and the UK. Well, there's separatists in Ukraine, right? And they're announcing a mass evacuation to Russia. Putin sees the situation deteriorating. That's the story we're getting from Russia, is the situation is deteriorating. But what part of this requires a Russian invasion? Well, none of it, right? Putin says Russia isn't against talks on US security proposals. Of course, that security has to do with NATO staying out of Ukraine and staying away from their border. Of course, Washington, D.C. would not like it if Russia had, shall we say, missiles parked along the Canadian border to the north. No, D.C. wouldn't like that at all, would they? Anyways, Putin says in Kiev, they need to discuss the conflict with these separatists. Okay? Kiev just needs to discuss the conflict with the separatists. Kiev being the Ukraine government. Now, Putin says the Belarus drills are defensive and they're not threatening anyone. But what do we have coming from our side of the pond, way over here on this side of the Iron Curtain? Well, we've got talk of Russian invasion, a Ukraine crisis. Now, yesterday, the Ukraine government, and who are we to criticize them for having armed conflict with separatists? My concern and my, I won't even say condemnation, but I'll say my criticism is that I don't know who is prompting the activity, the fighting between Ukraine and the separatists. And I don't know that I rightly believe that it's actually separatists and it's not just agents provocateur stirring up trouble, trying to cause conflict. Because that's what these governments do. They're both talking about false flags, right? False, shall we say, actions taken to antagonize their opponents and cause conflict. The Russians are talking about it and the Americans are talking about it. Now, the US Secretary of State, Blinken, says, we are seeing scenarios of Russia creating false provocations in Ukraine. Once again, false flag, but he called it false provocations. We are seeing scenarios. Well, don't just tell us you're seeing scenarios, give us examples. And we know that they have satellites, high altitude blimps, high altitude cameras, high altitude drones watching everything. We know that they know that we are watching them and they are watching us. We all know that we all know. So why don't you tell us, me and you, the people, what the hell's going on, instead of just saying there's evidence. Yeah, well, remember when there was evidence of weapons of mass destruction, evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Oh, their evidence was reconnaissance photography of a truck. And that truck, or at least one like it, was once used to manufacture weapons of mass destruction, so we need to invade. Unbelievable bullshit. That basically ended Colin Powell's credibility because he was used as a tool and then discarded See, everyone is disposable, even at that level, as long as the big guy, and I'm not talking Biden, I'm talking Klaus Schwab and boys, as long as the big guy and his buddies get their way. Okay, this is what's happening. So Blinken says we have scenarios of Russian false provocation. Putin says we are seeing rising tension in Donbass and need to implement Minsk peace agreements. So yeah, what Putin wants is the ceasefire agreements, the peace agreements, to be observed and not increase the tensions, which is what the U.S. government is doing. Putin also says, quote, right now we are seeing a deterioration of the situation in eastern Ukraine. Now, I think I could settle this pretty fast. How about if you Russian separatists inside Ukraine just separate yourselves and go over to Russia and cross the border and go into Russia, right? And I get it. It's a lot more complicated than that, right? But playing the blame game and scapegoating and making shit up and provoking the other side isn't going to solve anything. And it needs to be understood. It just takes one event, one serious event, and one side or the other is just going to lose their shit, right? Conflict escalation, if you want to call it that. You know, in Donbass, they are evacuating women, children, and elderly. According to one source, the Russian Rostov region is going to host people. The whole thing is just looking like shit. Okay, this is the essence of SHTF, folks. It's the essence of it, right? As governments fail to observe the rights of the people, as governments use more and more centralized control and power and dominance on their people, situations deteriorate. As nations become weaker because of economic frailty and failures, as there becomes more food issues and other resource issues, the tensions grow, anger grows, frustrations grow, and the odds of conflict go much higher until it finally breaks out. Once again, I'm talking about Ukraine, am I not? But look at the bigger players. There's a problem in Ukraine between these separatists, and Russia is very concerned about its border, and the US and NATO are concerned about their security. Canada, right? It's all concerned about its security. Is it really? I mean, that's how that works. You know, I'm going to take this back over here closer to home. Our good buddy there, Trudeau, he is very worried about his peace and his security, so he's invoked his emergency act. Well, guess what? A Canadian gas pipeline company had their equipment attacked, vandalized, destroyed, because violent leftists, oh, here we go, Antifa, environmentalist group types, with axes and other equipment, they tried to torch vehicles with workers inside. They've caused millions of dollars of damage. And Trudeau has no worries there. He's worried about peaceful truckers. Well, because they're right there in Ottawa. The same way Putin is very concerned that the US military and NATO want to be right on his border. They're not worried about people that are pushing their agenda, right? They're only worried about the other side. So yeah, Putin is not worried about the separatists, and I think he ought to be. Right? And the US isn't worried about the abuses in Ukraine, but they ought to be, right? We've got big crisis, folks. We have it over there in Ukraine, and it could break out. Be prepared. We have it up north, right? If you're a leftist scumbag piece of crap, you can do what you want. You can cause millions of dollars of damage in Canada or billions in the United States, no problem. You want to stand up for your rights and your liberties? You want government to respect those boundaries, right? You are now a problem. We've got big crisis in Canada, folks. What's it going to take? One serious provocation, a false flag, a major act of violence, and you're going to see a response, I think, that is going to frighten you. Right? In fact, people already, right now, are very frightened over what's going on in Canada because this use of emergency powers, the Emergency Act by Trudeau, is unprecedented. It's not justified. And it smacks of violent government extremism. Now, I'm going to take you over to Hong Kong, which was once a British colony, if you will, outside the jurisdiction of China. Now it is a piece of China. The people there, just like the Canadians, have had their rights taken from them over a course of a decade, had their rights taken from them, and they are now being beaten in the streets by Chinese troops who say you aren't allowed to protest. You aren't allowed to stand up for yourself. You're not allowed to speak up. You must obey. Where's the media on that, folks? Where's the media when it comes to these terrorist activities with regard to the Canadian pipelines? Where's the media when it comes time to look at our rights and privileges? Wait till the media is dismissed. Well, let's see, you have ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, CNBC, Fox Business. What happens when all of those mainstream sources are all shut down and it's replaced with the new Washington, D.C. news network? And that's the only voice that's allowed to speak. Hello, Big Brother, right? And hello, world. We're going to have some big, big troubles. Are you prepared? Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense, and a plan. Get it together, folks. It's getting nasty out there. We're going to have more and more crisis. And we see it here at home. Big inflation, deteriorating politics, threats, people demanding their rights, government opposed to that. Be prepared. Semper Fi means always faithful. Godspeed.